Hi guys, it's Kelly here, and I am back with another video for Picket Fence Studios. Today is release day, and I am going to be using these sugar-free and calorie-free cake stamps, the plaid stencil, and then this is something kind of new and interesting. It's a paper inking palette. They have a bunch of different sizes. I'm going to be using the 5x6 today to hold my card and my stencil. So the whole scene today is going to be a one layer card. So we're just going to get right into talking about some tips. So first things first, when I do a one layer card, whether it's using my masks or my stamps, I like to lay out and figure out where everything is going to go before I even start putting any ink on the paper. This gives me an idea of how much room I'm going to have. You can also, if you want to have a sentiment on the front, figure out where your sentiment is going to go at this time. I cannot tell you over the years how many scene cards I've done where I was so excited about the scene, I forgot to include my sentiment because I just didn't leave room for it. So when you're stamping things down with a one layer card, you want to make sure that whatever you want to see the most of is what you're going to stamp first. Also, in order to get a more interesting look, a more dimensional look, you don't want to put everything on the same level. So here you can see one of the cakes is scooted closer to the edge of the card, the bottom of the card. This is going to make it look as though it is closer to the front of our scene. And then I have two more that are pushed behind it. This particular scene is really easy because even though we're creating masks for all of them, it's because I'm doing some ink blending in the background, really we would only need to create masks for just these three if we weren't doing the ink blending and the stenciling in the background. If you're doing a Copic background, you'd only have to do these three because I'm stamping them all at one time. Even though they're on different levels, like two are scooted back and one is forward, none of them are going to interact with each other. So I can stamp them all at once because we'll see all of those images as well as my sentiment. I can go ahead and stamp that down as well. I'm using intense black ink from Picket Fence. This is safe for alcohol markers. Here, don't mind me, it's probably a dog hair or something. It's pretty typical of my videos since I do stamp in my robe and I have two dogs. So, anywho, I'm going to stamp all three of these down. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you, and if you have never watched my videos before, then let me tell you, I'm a very transparent person. I don't believe in covering up the mistakes or the issues that we run into as card makers. So I had a completely different intention for this card, but I had a lot of technical difficulties. We'll get into that in just a minute. So here, what I'm using is Eclipse masking paper. It comes on a roll. This is like my favorite go-to masking product, but there's a lot of them on the market. Here, I'm just cleaning up the edge on the one that doesn't quite fit. This is just a scrap piece. I never throw my scrap pieces away. I just stick them back down on my roll so that way I can get the most out of the product that I've purchased. I'm going to scoot this one up and then I'm going to stamp that last one, which will fit in that little area there. And then I will trim out my masks. You can use whatever masking products you like the best. Eclipse has always worked for me. The only downfall of an Eclipse masking paper is that you can't really die cut it. I've never had good luck separating it from a piece of cardstock after the fact. It will die cut, but then you're just stuck with a masking piece that's stuck to your cardstock. The one that I like for die cutting is Masking Magic because it has like a layer you can peel off behind it. So now that we have those stamped and our masks are in place, now we're going to stamp the next two cakes. These, again, just to create more dimension and more interest, I'm going to stamp one closer. That's this cake with the little glass, what is that, like a little cloche? Little glass lid. And so I'm going to stamp that one just slightly closer. And this one, I picked the shorter one to go on the right-hand side to leave lots of room for that sentiment to kind of breathe. Also for you to be able to see my quote-unquote wallpaper that we're going to create with our stenciling. And then again, once I stamp it, I will stamp it on a piece of Eclipse and then trim it out, apply down my mask, and then proceed with my stamping. Like I said, these ones you would not have to mask necessarily if you stamp them a little bit further apart. I did mine where they're kind of all layered up, but if you did them where this cake was just a little bit more to the left, you wouldn't have to mask either one of them if you weren't doing the ink blending or stenciling. I've always preferred ink blending in my backgrounds to Copic coloring because A, I feel like it's a much smoother blend, there's no streaking, and B, it saves me on my Copic ink because a re-inker for an ink pad goes a lot farther than a re-inker for an alcohol marker. With this, something to note about the masking, you'll notice this little cake is adorable. Okay, this thing is stinking cute. But it's got those little stars at the top. I'm not going to mask those stars because my background is going to be yellow. So I'm not overly concerned about color, like getting ink on yellow stars that I'm going to then color yellow. But sometimes with those little bits, you don't necessarily have to mask them if you're going to be using a darker color or, like if I was coloring this maybe a more golden yellow, even if I had a blue background, I wouldn't really worry about it. The other thing that I'm going to do here for masking, this is another thing that you can use. I also really like the Scotch masking tape, which is, you can buy it in like 1 inch or 2 inches. Here I'm using pixie tape. This is just a low tack tape. I use this to hold my die cuts in place. And I'm going to use that to create a horizon line at the bottom so that my wallpaper stops and then my showcase, I guess that's how you'd put it, my bakery case will begin. So I did just a very kind of light scattered straw. I wanted a more muted yellow background. I knew my cakes were going to be really bright. And then I went around the edges in fossilized amber. Here is that paper palette the paper inking palette I was telling you about. One side has a beveled edge. One side is just flat photopolymer. I'm not even going to take this off of its back piece of acetate. I'm just going to leave it on there. It makes it so much easier to put it back in its packaging. So here I'm just going through and I'm making sure that my plaid is lined up on the straights, like the straight left-hand side, the vertical, so that my plaid's going to be even. And then I'm just going to go back and I'm going to do tone on tone because I don't want it to take away from my cakes. I just want it to add to my scene. Now, if you watch my videos, you know that normally I would do blue in the background, and I'm not necessarily a yellow girl, but I knew that little rainbow cloud cake I was going to color blue, and then the glass lid that would cover the other cake would also be blue, and I thought that would pop really nicely off a yellow background. In order to remove it, I just pick up the palette, fold it down on its sides. My card popped right off. I had no issues. I'm going to go ahead and then start removing the masks. I'm going to do the pixie tape first. If you wanted to save your masks, you absolutely can. I would just stick them to the set so that way they're there the next time you maybe want to stamp and mask something. But I'm going to just peel mine off and set them to the side. Now, here is where we're going to run into not yet, but the technical difficulties are coming. Something else that you can do to add to your scenes, your 1-layer scenes that you could do masking with. I didn't, but you could. I'm going to create a little shelf here so that the 2 cakes in the back look like they're on another level. And I'm just going to do that by drawing 2 lines. You want to make sure that your lines are far enough in front of your images that they actually have a space that's big enough to sit on. But then this is going to create like a little riser. It's going to be like the side of the shelf that it's sitting on. So I always do mine in pencil first with a T-square ruler, and then once I'm happy with where they are, I go back in with a fine liner and then just reinforce those lines with the black liner because I've stamped everything in black, so it'll all be matchy-matchy. Just make sure you're careful not to draw the line through your cakes because the cakes would be in front of the riser, and so you want to make sure you're just putting the line in the in-between spaces. Then once that's done, I will go in with a eraser and erase those pencil lines because you just want to make sure that you get those up because with alcohol markers, if you go over pencil, it's then permanent. You can't get it back up. For the base, the ground, if you will, I'm using some cool grays. I knew that I was going to do all of my cake stands kind of like a stainless steel kind of look. And so I wanted to keep everything on the bottom the same note. Again, I know I'm going to be adding a lot of color to my cakes, and I really want those to be the focal point. So here I'm going in, I went in with my darkest color that went directly underneath the shelf because that would cast a shadow. It would be above, it would be casting a shadow below it since it's sitting above. And then also underneath all of my little cake stands. From there, I'm going to move out to the C3 and just kind of blend that out. Blend out that C5. Here I realized I forgot to put the C5 underneath the cake stands in the back. So that's what I'm doing there. And then again, I will just go back to that C3, continue blending these out. And then the C1 will almost completely fill in the little back shelf riser we have going on. But in the front, the C1 will kind of fade off to white. So that will have more light in the front of the case than you would in the back of the case. And that's just what we're trying to mimic here. So I did all of this coloring. The stamping, the masking, the background. Here we're going to do the cake stands, and we're going to use that same cool gray combination that we just used. The only difference is we're going to add in a C7, and you're going to see how much difference it makes just to add in a slightly darker color, just the next one up in this particular color family. And even though they are the same, it really does make a ton of difference to add that darkness in. So that you can see the areas that would cast shadow on the cake stand, and it gives it a much more like silver look versus a gray or a white where we've just colored in the shadows. But anywho, so I did all of this last night. I did all of this last night, and then I called it quits. It was kind of a busier Saturday, just because I was trying to be a good mom and I let Peanut Butter have a friend spend the night, but that also fell on the playoff game, which was like the first game that the Browns were in like the last 20 years. They got absolutely annihilated, but nonetheless, so my husband was out at his parents' watching the game, and I was home with my children and then a guest child. So it was just a little bit wild. But anywho, so after everybody had gone to bed, not my husband, but the kids, I came up here and did this part, and then I went back downstairs just so I could have a little bit of time with him. Here's something else to note. So here, sometimes when you're stamping stamps further back into your scenes where you're not seeing all of it, it can be a little challenging to know what is what color. Don't be afraid to go back and look at your stamps or keep your stamp set next to you on the desk. That's exactly what I did here. This particular cake stand is drawn where it kind of has like a scalloped edge. And so I colored the base because I knew that was part of it, but trying to figure out where the lid started and the base, or the lid ended and the base started, I was having a little bit of a hard time. So I just pulled this stamp out and looked at it. Those acetate sheets that have the pre-printed images on them are fantastic for, being able to see what should be what. But anywho, so I went back downstairs and then I was done. Today I came back up to finish doing the coloring, and then, all the rest of the things, do the coloring, the editing, blah, 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 blah. You get what I'm saying. Except my camera didn't want me to do that. So I literally colored everything, colored all the cakes, the whole thing, did all the detail work, everything else. I had a whole different plan for what I was going to do with my little one layer scene, as far as adding things to the card to make it different. And my camera just stopped working. I don't know at what point it stopped working, but when I tried to pull the file for the coloring, it was corrupt. So I tried running some recovery software. I was unable to recover it. And so I had to recolor the cakes. Now, I did not recolor all of the cakes. I recolored these 3. See, so here's my card on the left that is completely finished. And here's the new stamped images on the right. The cake that is in the front and center is a pretty simple cake. The cake in the back with the florals on it is also pretty simple. So I opted to color the three that I felt were the most unique and different, or the techniques that I did were unique and different, because I just didn't have time to do all of them again. But I wanted you to get the gist of it. So, as I told you previously, we colored everything in the bottom with cool grays. So for the whites on my cakes, I am going with warm grays so that there is a difference between the two. And so the cool grays will read as silver, which is what my intention is. And my clouds and my vanilla cakes and my things like that will read as white. So when you're coloring anything white, you want to make sure that you're just adding in the shadows. And that's what I'm doing here. Another thing that's a really great tip is here you can see there's like a drip over the stripes, and I did want to do it as a stripe, but I wanted the stripes to be white and another color. Rather than going in and coloring each individual stripe, I just shaded the whole thing with the grays, because my next color will be dark enough to cover up those grays, and it makes it easier to shade rather than having to go in and shade each individual stripe. If you just shade the whole thing with the grays, it makes it much easier. If you feel like your darkest color is making your white too dark, you can do what I did here with this cake. Instead of adding shading with the darkest color underneath it all the way across the board, I added shading to the darkest color just on one side. So just on the left hand side, it still gives us lots of really good cast shadow, but it does keep it lighter. So once all of my white is done, I moved on to my next color, which was red. I'm going to use that to get my strawberries, the top part of my rainbow, and then one of the little dollops of frosting over here. This cake is going to be like a rainbow cake. And in order to achieve that, down at the bottom, you see it has all these sprinkles. I wanted my sprinkles to look rainbow colored. So I just went in with each color, and you'll see that kind of as we go. I went in with each color. I picked the mid-tone. So for the red, it was an R29. For the green, I actually used the YG03, the lightest color. But anyway, so I'm just doing a series of dots. I'm not covering up the whole thing, but then by the time it's done, by the time we have all of the dots, it'll look like rainbow sprinkles at the bottom with really very minimal work for us. So as I was going through and doing this, the camera just kept stopping. I don't know if it was overheating. I thought maybe my, what is that called? My SD card was too full. So I tried deleting some things and it just kept stopping. So I kept having to stop, take out, and this particular camera, if you watch my channel, you know this is a new camera. This particular camera, you just open it to turn it on. There is no on and off switch. So when you open the LCD screen, it turns it on. So I kept having to unplug it, pop the battery while it was closed up, put the battery back in, replug it in, and then open it, and it would reset itself. It would ask me if I wanted to recover my data. I would say yes. It would recover my data, and then we would move on to the next thing. This was excruciating, as I'm sure that you can imagine. But we did manage to get enough footage, I think, to make it through. This is roughly, it's a little bit shorter than my usual videos, but I think you get the gist of it. You just have to be patient with me with the coloring portion. So I chose some brighter blues for this kind of clouds and stars cake. I thought that the blue would look really nice, kind of popping off the yellow, and it would give us something to break up that dark brown, light brown, beigey kind of feel that you get with cakes. That they don't have to be kind of plain and boring. That's why I went with the green stripe for my, I'm thinking of it as a chocolate covered strawberry cake. That's what I'm viewing it as. But just so that way there is lots of interest, I used the yellow. Again, my camera died. Apologies. I used the yellow to do the trim on the cake, the sun, and then, of course, the yellow stripe and the rainbow. For the ones that you did not see me color, I used it for some florals. In that particular cake, there's also strawberries, so it repeated my red, and then I did some blue. They look like rosebuds, just to keep the consistency of the colors, because we do have a lot of rainbow going on. I just want to make sure those colors are repeated. For the purple, there was not a lot of purple in the rainbow, but I didn't want to leave it out, so I chose to do the candle on the rainbow cake purple, and then I also did the one that you did not see me color. I did the sprinkles on it purple, as well as the little frosting dollops, and the one that has the flowers on it, I did the ribbon purple. So all the colors are represented. For these little drips, you could do them any color you wanted. I have a really hard time, because this is how I do my ganache. Like, I do my ganache dripped on my cake like this. I had a really hard time seeing them as anything other than chocolate, so that's what I colored them on all of them. And I chose the 20s family, which is a bit warmer of a brown, but I really like it. And actually, which one is it? Is it 25 or is it 20? No, 25 is cocoa, which still makes sense. It's got to be 27, is actually called milk chocolate, so it's totally fitting. After that, I started doing my details. Once all the coloring was done, I added some white highlights with a white gel pen. And then I also did some white dots within my sprinkles to kind of break that up. I forgot to color the glass portion, and then my camera died again. Story of this video. Then my camera died again. But so I did go back and do the same thing over, just so you would be able to see how it was done. You do want to make sure when you're doing that, you are skipping those red areas, because with a lighter color, you can drag the red. And then I went in and did my white highlight. With those white highlights on the glass things, you want to just go right over the stamping, because the highlight is on the glass part, and that's on the outside of the cake. I also added some Stardust stickles to some of the areas, the sun, the stars, the rainbow, some of the flowers. I did a couple of dots of glitter into my rainbow sprinkles. And then for all of my ganaches, I used glossy accents so that when they dry, they are nice and shiny. You can still see the white highlights through the glossy accents in person, and so it makes it really nice. Anywho, I hope you learned a little something about masking today. I will go back and try my original game plan for another card at a different time. Thank you guys for your patience and for your time today. I always appreciate you, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.